Nancy Drew Mystery Stories, number 22, The Clue in the Crumbling Wall, by Carolyn Keene. Copyright 1973, Simon & Schuster. Chapter 1, An Urgent Request. "Hurry, Nancy!" Hannah Gruen called anxiously. The Drews' housekeeper held the front door open as jagged lightning cut the sky. Nancy raced madly toward the door, her reddish blonde hair flying in the wind. "Made it!" she gasped, laughing as great drops of rain pelted the driveway. The attractive 18-year-old girl stepped into the hall and stopped in surprise. Behind Hannah stood a slender young policewoman in a blue uniform. "This is Lieutenant Masters, dear," said Hannah. "She arrived just before your car turned into the driveway." "I can't stay long, Nancy," the officer said, "so I'll come right to the point. Will you help solve a mystery?" The woman's dark eyes gazed into Nancy steadily. "I'm sure you can do it." Nancy was amazed, but merely said, "I'd like to hear about it. Won't you come in and sit down?" She led the officer into the living room. Nancy's zest for adventure came to her naturally from her father, Carson Drew, a well-known lawyer. While helping him, she had solved her first case, The Secret of the Old Clock. Since then, she had been successful in finding the solutions to several mysteries, the most recent one, The Secret in the Old Attic. By now, Nancy had an outstanding reputation, even with the police, as an amateur sleuth. "Chief McGinnis recommended that I ask you," Lieutenant Masters said, seating herself on the sofa. "He told me you have great insight into character." The trim, dark-haired officer explained that she had just joined the River Heights Police Department. "This case is related to one of mine. I'm in charge of juvenile offenders." "Then your mystery involves a child?" "Yes, a pretty little 8-year-old girl named Joan Fenimore. She's been in trouble with the law and will be in more, I'm afraid, unless we can find her aunt. Nancy, have you ever heard of Juliana Johnson?" "She was a dancer, wasn't she?" Nancy asked. "Yes, she disappeared 10 years ago at the height of her career." "And she's Joan's aunt?" "Yes, Juliana must be found within the next 3 weeks or lose an inheritance that a friend willed to her. If we can find her, surely she'll help Joan and her mother and make a new way of life for Joan." 3 weeks, Nancy repeated. "That means I haven't a moment to lose." The lieutenant's grave face broke into a smile. "Then you'll take the case," she said. "I'm so glad." She glanced at her watch and rose quickly. "I must go now. The rain has stopped. I was on a call in this neighborhood and decided to drop by on the chance you were at home. Could you meet me at headquarters about 3 o'clock this afternoon?" "Certainly," Nancy replied. "Fine. I'll tell you all about it then, and we'll go see Joan and her mother. By the way," she added when they reached the door, "do you know Heath Castle, a big estate some miles outside of town?" "Yes, I do," Nancy said. "I've seen it from the river. It's that spooky-looking place with those stone towers and the high walls around it." "Find out all you can about the place," Lieutenant Masters said. "It's Juliana's inheritance. And thank you, Nancy. Little Joan really needs your help." After the policewoman had left, Nancy went to the kitchen and told Hannah about the mystery. "Now you're happy," the kindly middle-aged woman said fondly. "You have a new case. I just hope it won't be dangerous." Mrs. Gruen had been with the family since the death of Mrs. Drew when Nancy was 3 years old. The warm-hearted housekeeper had always been like a mother to the girl. "What do you know about Heath Castle?" Nancy asked her. "Not much. It was built—" "Hannah!" Nancy exclaimed. She was facing the window. "Look! In the yard!" "What is it?" the housekeeper asked, peering through the glass. "Oh, what a shame!" she cried out. "All the hollyhocks are snapped off in the middle, and the daisies are flattened into the mud from the rain." "That's not what I mean," said Nancy. "Look at the flower border where my new rose bushes were." "Why, they're gone," said Hannah. She stared in amazement at 2 holes filled with rainwater. "The bushes were dug up," said Nancy, "and stolen." "Probably by the same thief who took plants from some of our neighbors," Hannah remarked. "There's been a rash of these thefts lately." "I'll report it when I go to headquarters this afternoon," Nancy said. While she set the table and heated soup, Hannah made sandwiches. By the time the two had finished their lunch, the ground had dried a little and the sun was out. They hurried into the backyard to inspect the damage. Except for the rose bushes, no plants were missing. Nancy could not find any clues to the thief. She and Hannah began cleaning up debris from the storm. Suddenly they heard the familiar song of one of River Heights' well-known eccentric characters. "Here comes my old friend Salty down the street," Nancy laughed, shaking off her somber mood. The good-natured elderly man, once a sailor, had received his nickname from Nancy when she was a little girl. He had introduced himself to the Drew household as Boatswain Bostwick Bumpleton, home from the salty seas. Nancy had tried to say his whole name, but sometimes mixed it up. Once she addressed him as Bumbleboat, and another time as Humpty Dumpty Bumpleton, much to his amusement. Finally, the little girl settled on Salty, and her nickname stuck to him. The man's cart bell tinkled merrily, and a moment later the jolly, weather-beaten sailor wheeled his wagon around the corner of the driveway. Spying Nancy and Hannah, he sang again. "Clams by the bushel, clams by the lot, clams for the kettle, clams for the pot." "None for us today," Mrs. Gruen called. Salty smiled. "Come now," he coaxed. "You can't turn down me clams. They're nutritious, delicious, delectable, respectable. Matter of fact, you might even find a pearl in one of 'em." Nancy turned to Hannah. "Don't you think we could use a few pearly clams?" she asked with a wink. The housekeeper gave in. "Okay, a dozen. Nancy, please get my purse." Nancy darted away, but soon returned with the pocketbook and a container for the clams. After the elderly sailor had left, she and Hannah took the clams into the kitchen, and Nancy started to open them with a sharp knife. Soon she had a pile of empty shells, but no pearls. "I guess these haven't anything in them but meat. Well, here's the last one." Nancy opened the clam and was about to toss away the attractive rainbow-colored shell when a tiny object inside drew her attention. "A pearl!" she cried, holding it out for the housekeeper to see. Hannah stared at the small white object. "I declare it is one," she acknowledged, "and maybe worth some money." "I'll take it to Sam Weatherby," Nancy said eagerly. She removed the pearl and washed it, then drove to Mr. Weatherby's shop. The owner was a dealer in curios and antique jewelry. Nancy had to wait 15 minutes while an unpleasant man bargained with the shop owner over a piece of jewelry he wanted to sell. It was a man's antique watch chain with an attractive gold charm. At last, the customer accepted an offer, pocketed the money Mr. Weatherby paid him, and turned on his heel, remarking, "I might as well have given it to you." After the man had left, Mr. Weatherby said to Nancy, "That was Daniel Hector. How he loves to argue. If all my customers were like him, I'd have to close up shop. Well, what can I do for you, Nancy?" She removed the pearl from her purse and asked the curio dealer what it was worth. "Well, well," he said, examining the object carefully. "It's nice, but river pearls are not valuable." He named a modest sum. "I'll buy it if you'll bring me the shell from which it was taken. I want to display the pearl with the shell." Nancy promised to return with the shell the next day. Then she put the pearl in her pocketbook and left the shop. She started walking the few crowded blocks to police headquarters. As Nancy stopped to look in the window of a department store, A boy drew close to her. Then suddenly he jerked the purse from beneath her arm and fled. End of chapter 1.